Welcome to the Honest to Goodness podcast. It's summertime, and for the first time ever, we are recording from my home, which I do not love because it takes a whole lot. It's a thing. Yeah. You got to clean your house because your girlfriends are coming over.
Right.
And then your guests are coming over. And then you got to get the snacks.
Yep.
And then because it's summertime, Tessa and Nicole both have to cart their kids, which my kid is super, super thrilled about. And she lives for this. So, yeah. So they've been confined to the basement today. But yeah, we have our first guest with us today. Welcome, Lexi.
Welcome.
So Lexi, I'm going to ask you a few questions about yourself, and feel free to just take it where you will. Tell us who you are and then what you do, and then we'll go from there.
All right. My name is Lexi Finke. I guess you could say I'm a food blogger. I have a food Instagram. I'm married to a professional athlete. He plays professional basketball. We've lived all over the world, in Europe, and then most recently Japan this past year. I'm pregnant with my first child, a girl, and she's due in September, about 30 weeks now. Aww. So, yeah, it's exciting. I'm a little nervous to be here. This is my first podcast.
That's fine. I met you because I was your wedding photographer.
Yes.
And something special about you is that you were supposed to get married during the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I don't know if that makes you special.
I think we've had so many wedding dates. I think the original one was July 17th of 2020. Uh-huh. And then that got canceled because of the pandemic. And we decided, I think I messaged you like pretty impromptu and was like, hey, could you do our wedding on Thursday? And we got married on June 4th, a Thursday, 2020. It was me, my husband, Michael, Rebecca, and my grandpa who officiated the wedding. So very special.
Would you redo it differently now, Lexi, or do you love how it went down?
I look back on that time and I was so stressed. I mean, everyone was stressed during the pandemic, but I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get my wedding. And we ended up having our big wedding as well a year later, which Rebecca also photographed. But no, we celebrate June 4th as our wedding date now. So, and that is the most special day of them all. So
it was super romantic. They got married under a willow tree. And I didn't realize how important, I mean, grandfathers are always important, right? But I didn't realize the role he played in your life. And at that point, I didn't find out until later. So how about you tell us a little bit about that, about where you grew up, how you grew up?
Okay, so I grew up in Monticello, not too far from here. Okay. I grew up with my mom and two younger sisters, and my dad. They were separated, but all involved, and a ton of grandparents. So I credit my grandparents for so many things in my life. They gave me so much stability and just love from all angles. And I had parents that had me very young. 2 years ago, my grandma passed away, and I said I was blessed to have teen parents because that meant I got all my grandparents. So yeah, I grew up in the church. My grandpa, who officiated my wedding, became a pastor later in life. So I always grew up in a church, very small town, very rural church with about 50 people. And so I knew Jesus to an extent. And it was kind of cool looking back to see that it was so small because it wasn't about show at all. It was all about your relationship with Jesus. And so, yeah, later on, my grandpa, I think I was probably in high school, he got his, I don't know what you call it, license to be a pastor. And so he was able to officiate our wedding, and yeah. So
when you say you had teen parents, how old were they when they had you?
I believe my mom was 17 when she got pregnant with me and 18 when she had me. Yeah. Okay. My dad was about a year older, so.
And so you have two sisters, is that what you said?
I have two younger sisters.
Okay, and is there a large gap between?
Big gap, yeah. So I was 8 when one was born and 9 when the other. So they're about, I think they're 10 months apart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so having that gap and kind of growing up with your parents at the same time, do you feel like you had a different style of childhood? Like, did you feel like you learned responsibility pretty early on?
Yes, definitely. And I kind of consider my childhood, it's hard to talk about because a lot of my story that is ingrained in present day leads back to that. And there are other characters in my story that are still actively, dealing with things, going through things. So I try to be really careful with how I speak about it. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of like 50% amazing and 50% chaos. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, the relationship that I had with my parents was great. And also at times not so great. So it kind of, that childhood aspect in me instilled a hypervigilance where I'm still struggle with today, where I'm kind of like, is this scenario going to be amazing or is it going to be super chaotic? And I'm always on alert for like worst case scenario type things. So, yeah.
So you said you grew up in the church. Did your parents attend with you, or was that something more so you just attended with your grandparents?
More so just my grandparents. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, my parents now, they both have a relationship with Jesus, which has really been amazing to see their transformation over the years.
So, okay, so you walked us through kind of that part of your life. When do you feel like you developed your own personal relationship with Jesus?
That is a really good question because I kind of feel like I always had one, but it wasn't always, like I look back and it was kind of transactional. And I think it was you, Nicole. I was listening to a podcast the other day. I don't know which one, what number, but you were saying something along the same lines of it was like checking a box.
Yeah, for sure.
So a lot of times in high school, I would party on Saturday nights and show up to church on Sunday mornings, and I checked my box and I would see my grandparents and I'd have lunch with my grandparents, but it was a transactional relationship. And then I would go to God and say, I want XYZ. And like when it didn't happen, I was like discouraged. And looking back on that, it wasn't healthy. Right. And so what I strive for today is just really a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
Especially because we travel all throughout the world. Last year we were in Japan and there's no English speaking churches. And there's no Bible studies and no communities. So both me and my husband Michael, I think we try to focus on that relationship aspect with Jesus.
How did you stay rooted in Japan, just living in a country without Christian community?
So there were other wives on the team, one from Germany, one from America. She lives in California, and they were both Christians. So that was good that we had each other. Kind of reading my Bible, listening to podcasts. But even that is hard for me to, sit down, if I'm being totally honest with myself, to sit down and make that time. Or make that effort really, because I did have time, if I'm being honest. So when I listened to your guys' first episode, and you talked about quiet time and all that, was really inspired. Like, I need to make an effort to have that quiet time. So whenever I come home, I'm always like just itching to get back to church. And I was lucky that there was a Bible study going on, when I came back this summer, and I did that for 5 weeks. And
awesome.
Yeah.
So when I first met you or heard of you from my then nanny, Haley, who worked with you,
yes.
While you were in college, you were a server at a local restaurant, and you were working as you were attending school. And I just remember thinking, okay, I get this girl, because that's what I did. I had 2 jobs while I was putting myself through school, and I didn't really have the financial support of my dad was gone, and that changed my mom's circumstances and things like that. So how is it that you came from these humble beginnings with young parents, and it sounds like a community, like bringing you up, to attending the University of Illinois and graduating, and then meeting your now husband, Michael, and now you you find yourself traveling the world, and you're married to a professional basketball player. And then we'll also dig into like what you're doing independently. But what did that season look like for you in college?
Okay, so I think a big part of like my testimony as a whole is that growing up, and especially when I got to the age of high school and my peers around me were like, oh, I want to do this. I want to go to this school. I want to do this for a career. I didn't have that drive and that passion. I lacked that same, or I didn't have that same, I guess, instinct, you would say. So I always just kind of knew what I didn't want. So when I decided to go to Parkland, and I had a couple of friends. We went to Parkland together, got an apartment. In those years, I could kind of figure out what I wanted to do. Then I applied for scholarship to U of I, and I got it. So one of my biggest blessings in life is that me and my husband both don't have student loans.
Yes.
So I went to U of I, still didn't really know what I wanted to do, but kind of took a leap, and I got my degree in community health, and was working full-time as a server and going to school full-time. So that's when I met Haley. And yeah, it was, I guess, up until I was about 22, I was going really hard, like grinding, like work, school, like no free time, whatever. And it all hit me like a ton of bricks. And that's when I first felt the feeling of anxiety before. And not just like a little like nervousness or stress, or like full on took over my whole life, made me bedridden. And that's a huge part of my story as well. But back to what I was saying in my testimony is I never knew what I wanted, really. I never had that drive and that passion, but somehow I look back on where I am today and I'm like, wow, look at what God blessed me with. Mm-hmm. Somehow I ended up with the most amazing, gentle husband, the experiences that we'll look back on for the rest of our life, and I cherish to this day. A career that somehow just fell into my lap. I didn't know that's what I wanted to do. Something I became passionate about, a family, and just not only from my own family, but Michael's family as well are my very best friends, and just the support system that I have. And I'm like, how did I go from this to this? And really God is the only answer to that. So yeah, I don't know if I feel like I kind of answered your question in 10 parts.
You did. So you got a gentle husband out of it, and you have a family that you love deeply through mm-hmm. his family. And would you say that this adult part of your life seems like a redemption story? Because like from the outside looking in, and what I have heard of you, like you have, from the outside looking in, if you look at it like on a piece of paper, you see, I mean, you grew up here locally, mm-hmm. You're a Monticello girl, and you were born to young parents, and you did have a community, and you were pointed to Jesus, but you kind of, like anyone who's born to young parents, you had to learn a lot of things on your own mm-hmm. or alongside your parents or the people raising you. And now you look at, like you said, where you're at now. If you were to put it on paper, how many countries have you lived in now, including the United States?
I think 7. So we first were in Poland, then Estonia, the Netherlands, Greece, Cyprus, Portugal, and Japan.
Okay. That's amazing.
Wow.
I know. And I had never been on an airplane until college. I think I was 20 when me and Michael and Michael's family went to Orlando on an Allegiant flight. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So it's...
And now you're probably sick of the planes.
Right. Now it's like, I think I flew to and from Japan 5 times this last year.
Oh, that's a flight. Oh my goodness.
That's a flight.
That's a flight. And now, you and Michael are going to have your baby this fall, which mm-hmm. is amazing. And you're so blessed in that way. So you've had this grand adventure. And then you also touched on the fact that you have a business that you didn't like, and I can relate to this as well, that you didn't seek out, but it was just like a hobby, a passion, something that you love, that kind of, if you look at like the numbers, let's say on Instagram, it kind of imploded, you know, like, so can you tell us a little bit about that, like what you do over there and what that looks like?
Okay, well, first off, I'll say I did take a little bit of a break. So
that's okay. We've all done it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I felt the stirring from your first episode. When I listened to that, I was like, wow, I 100% relate to what all three of you said. But getting pregnant, and I was very sick in my first trimester. It kind of forced me to take a time out. And so I've been taking some time off, and I haven't came back to it quite yet. But the way I got into it was I was overseas with my husband. We were in the Netherlands, and it was during lockdown still. Things were pretty, no restaurants were open. There's not much to do. And I was cooking for him. And let me backtrack a little bit, because I did start the page years prior, but I wasn't using it quite yet. So I started the page a few years prior when I started having pretty severe anxiety. So that's how its origin story. I was having severe anxiety, and I had moved in with Michael's parents, which is very unconventional because Michael was actually in Phoenix, playing in his 5th year at GCU. So I had an apartment, and I feel like I'm getting way off track, sorry. But I had an apartment, and I was working my server job. And one day I went to greet a table like I do hundreds of times a day, and I went completely mute, and I couldn't speak, and my heart was racing, and I was like, I couldn't form sentences, and I just so embarrassingly walked away. And I told my friend, I was like, I think I'm like having a heart attack. I don't know what this is. And it was a panic attack, but I called Michael's mom, and I didn't really know her that well at the time. And she came and met me. So did an ambulance. An ambulance confirmed, yes, this is just a panic attack. You're not having a heart attack. But that was like the journey of the start of my really severe anxiety that really transitioned into health anxiety too, because I thought, am I having a heart attack? Am I having a stroke? So as I healed myself over the course of those years, I got into therapy. I completely changed my diet around. I started exercising. I started just doing things to care for myself. And that's how I got into healthy recipes. So we took a little detour there. But I was sharing all of that, and then slowly transitioned to niche down more to just healthy recipes. Yeah. So then when we were in the Netherlands, that's when I really started devoting time to it, treating it like my job, even though I was making $0 for many years. I would get up, I'd say, this is what we're going to have for dinner. I'm going to film it. I'm going to photograph it. I'm going to put it on the blog. And I had a little tiny community that supported me then of, less than 1,000 people. And within probably a year or 2 years, I just had some videos go viral, and it's just blossomed into that. So.
My gosh, Lexi.
Yeah.
Well, you are amazing.
You're so sweet.
I wanted to ask you, by taking this break that you've recently taken, well, first of all, I wanted to ask you, do you feel like when you blew up, that gave you more anxiety, more pressure to perform and deliver and produce?
Yes, for sure.
So, you can expand on that if you want.
So initially, I feel like the growth really fueled me. I was like, oh, this is the fire that I needed to keep going, because if anyone is in that space, doesn't matter what you're sharing, sometimes it feels like you're posting to nobody. You're like, does anyone even care? Is this purposeful at all? So it did fuel me for a little bit. And then you get in the trap of, you have to do this to keep up with it. And then it leads to burnout. And I think the lowest point for me was, even recently in Japan, this past year, I realized a lot of my prayers were centered around numbers of, God, this is my livelihood. This is something I've dreamt about and I've been growing to, and I know there's purpose here, but I can't sustain this. And when I would have a bad post or a bad numbers or low views on anything, my worth was so tied to that, that I realized, I'm like, when every single one of my prayers is about Instagram numbers, that's a problem. And I had to really take a step back, and just start praying about like, I really scaled back what I was sharing and how much I was sharing. But like saying, God, what is my purpose here? I know there's something, but if this is not it, then like, please show it to me, because I don't want to keep having this, anxiety and pressure on myself if this is not what I'm supposed to do. And I am not a journaler. I don't know which one of you said like, you're not a journaler, but that was me. I don't journal.
It was probably
I
Nicole.
think me, yeah. Now I am, but I never was before, yeah.
And I opened up a blank notebook, and I remember this, I know the date, it was November 15th of this year, and I just wrote all my feelings down and was like, I don't want to be so consumed with this, and I just want you to show me my purpose, and I don't know what that is. And within a month, I found out I was pregnant. And so I was like, I don't know if that's my purpose. If my purpose is
one of your many purposes,
to be a mom, or I just knew that this is the season of my life that I'm supposed to be in. So ever since then, I've just had this peace about me that I don't care about numbers at this point. And I know whenever I want to jump back into it, there will be people there. And I've lost about 10,000 followers, but it doesn't like affect me like it did before. And I
think it's really evident to Lexi that God's like favor is upon you in your life, and everything that you do, he blesses. So it's like, even in the season of stillness and quiet, it's like, I feel like he's revealing himself.
Yes, definitely. And at first I was like, it can be very lonely overseas. And that's another reason why I jumped into doing that, because I just needed something to occupy my time. And when Michael travels, sometimes he's gone for a week at a time. And so having that outlet is amazing, but I couldn't have it overtake me too. So,
What do you know now in this season of your life, let's say after you've married Michael to now, or after the anxiety began to now, about God that you feel like you didn't know before? Or what's resonating with you now about him?
That's a really good question. I don't know about necessarily since I've had anxiety, because it has been a journey of like many years. Even last year when we were in Portugal, I was still dealing with such severe anxiety where I thought, I really want to be a mom, but I don't know. I'm not ready right now. I can't bring a child into this world when I feel this way. And to just give those needs over to him and see like the peace that he's given me even within a year and a half.
Has this pregnancy been peaceful?
Very peaceful.
Oh, good.
Yes. And honestly, I don't know if it's God, pregnancy hormones, what it is, but like I haven't ever felt a peace like this since I was a small child. So it's been amazing.
I love to hear
Well,
that.
Nicole and you are both due at around the same time, within a few weeks of each other. And I know for you too, Nicole, that anxiety is something that you have struggled with. Within pregnancy too, like how would you say that your pregnancy is different this time around than in past?
Well, with my other two kids, I think I was just so naive that anything bad could happen to me. I just was like, oh, everything's going to be fine. Positive pregnancy test equates to a healthy baby full term. And then I had a loss a couple years ago. And so this time around, I think it's been a roller coaster for me. But I'm reaching this point of peace. And I think that God purposefully placed me here for such a time as this, pregnant. Actually, I have a similar story. So sorry, I'm backtracking a little bit, but last year I kept feeling a stirring, and I kept thinking, like, God, what exactly am I supposed to do? Because I don't feel like this is it. And he just kept stripping things away from me, and I'd have to keep saying no, and like, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to commit to this. And in turn, I felt like my business would likely suffer from that, just because I'm not showing up how I used to. And then I said no to several things big last year, especially at the end of the year. And then in January, I found out I was pregnant. And so I was just like, wow, I really resonate with that.
Yeah, really like the same story almost.
Yeah. Like seriously the same. And
very paralleled.
Yeah. So, but from that loss to pregnancy, it was very high anxiety, just a lot of health anxiety, because you're just not sure what's going on in your body,
right?
Especially something like traumatic that happened physically. So this pregnancy, I feel like, has had its definite hard moments of high anxiety, but thankfully I've had good community and really just deepened my relationship with Jesus, and really had to surrender it, and align my expectations with what he says, not what I want.
Yes.
So it's like his promises are different and his ways are higher, his thoughts are higher. I just really have to trust him. And I think that really is the whole purpose of this pregnancy, is to learn to trust God again.
Yeah. I really feel that.
Yeah.
I've been exposed. I don't struggle, knock on wood, I don't struggle with anxiety, but I've been exposed to it. And I think a lot of people, this will resonate with, even if you don't struggle with anxiety. It's the dialogue in today's culture. It's being talked about because it's been recognized, right? And so people that I love, even in my own household, struggle from anxiety. And one thing about anxiety that I'm actually grateful for is it brought us to the living word of God, because modern medicine will take you to a certain point of comfort. It will alleviate symptoms, like the physical symptoms of your attacks can be treated immediately with things like lorazepam or Ativan or things like that. But it doesn't help you in the long term, right? Like your mind is still spiraling out of control. Even the new Disney Pixar movie Inside Out 2 has a character called Anxiety. And not to give any spoilers away, but there's so many relatable like things that happen in that movie that even small children now can relate to, and they have this like cartoon depiction of what they're experiencing. And anxiety is not something that is surprising to God in the Bible. And I have not personally counted, but I have seen many references on Instagram that the Bible references what God says to do to combat anxiety over 365 times. And that number, I don't know if it was formulated because there's 365 days in the year and whoever was creating this post thought that was cool, or if it's legitimately so that is the number of how many times Jesus addresses it. In John 14:27, Jesus is speaking, and this is before his ascension back into heaven. He says, I am leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart, and the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid. Remember what I told you. I am going away, but I will come back to you again. If you really loved me, you would be happy that I'm going to the Father who is greater than I am. I have told you these things before they happen, so that when they do happen, you will believe. So Jesus addresses that he is the answer. We've all reached a point. For you two, it was anxiety. For me, it was a lack of peace. So something in the same lane, right? To stepping away. And the answer for me, and it was quiet for a while. It was quiet. God was quiet. But what he told me in my season of the stirring, of the pause, was to seek him, to pursue him, to come to know him. And I discovered in that season that all along, like what I should be doing with my life is not in my career. Like, my career is a blessing, and there are byproducts of that blessing that I get to serve him and honor him and love him by being exposed to so many different people and opportunities. But the point is to know God.
Yeah.
And that is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And there will be different avenues, including my career, that I get to do that. This is another avenue that I get to do that. And so I'm just wondering, and I already know the answer for Nicole is similar, so I'm going to ask you, Lex, what you're doing right now from this point where you've experienced peace in this pregnancy, you've taken a pause from the hustle culture for a minute, and you may be called back to that for the sake of providing for your family, or even just good mental health, or just having fun, whatever that looks like. But what are your goals right now moving forward? And that's a big question.
Yeah,
I know
that's a hard one.
That's a hard one. But like today, right now, like, what do you hope for yourself?
I think, okay, so let me go back to, I just listened to your episode with Pam Peoples, and she said something that I wrote down in my notes, where she said she lost her appetite for radio. And that's kind of how I feel about content creation as a whole. So I kind of thought in the early stages of pregnancy, let me take a break from food. And maybe I'll share stuff about my pregnancy, or maybe I won't. Or maybe I'll share, new mom life, or maybe I won't. I just want something that I have the appetite and the passion for. And if it's not there, then I won't share. But I think something to add on to what you were saying in like the health space, and I'm not so much into like wellness culture necessarily. I'm more just like healthy recipes and kind of like stay in that lane. But you open up Instagram and it's like, eat this to feel this way, do this, like do a cold tub, do a sauna, do a this, exercise like this to feel like mentally well. All those things are amazing. Like I live by so many of those things. Eating healthy, taking care of yourself, therapy. I was on medication for 5 years too, like you had mentioned. And all of those things are amazing, but without like Jesus and a relationship, I still felt really empty. So yeah, I guess my goal in this going forward is just to maintain that peace that I have now. And it's really intimidating for me as a first-time mom to bring a child into the world. That has been my biggest fear and biggest source of anxiety for the past probably 4 years, since Michael and I got married. I really just wanted to make sure I was ready, and that we were ready and that we were capable. And now I feel like I am, and I have that peace, and I just want to keep going forward. And if that ties into content creation, that's amazing. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So
I love that. And that is partly why I just felt led to ask you to be on this podcast, because if you lay it out, it looks like from the world standards, or even from from a fleshly standard a perspective, and from a believer's perspective, you have it all, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have 100,000+ followers on Instagram, and a successful, fun thing that you do. You're married to a professional athlete. You're beautiful. Your family is growing. You have a family of like local famous people that are just so good and loving and pour into you. And yet when it comes down to it, all of that could fall away, and we find that we're most thirsty for Jesus.
Exactly.
And he is the only thing and the number one thing that can truly fill us up. Mm-hmm. So I saw you pause on Instagram, mm-hmm. and I wondered if that was what was happening with you. And so I'm not surprised, because the Lord is doing it in so many people's lives, but I think God is trying to teach us about him, and like how we need to go back to him to find what we're looking for, and not just find what we're looking for, but to truly thrive in our happiness, in our life, in our joy, because he is the only one that can bring it. So thank you for being here and sharing.
I was so happy to be here. I hope that I was able to execute my words properly. I'm kind of an awkward.
No, you did wonderful.
Fine. And for those that were just listening, I mean, you'll see on YouTube my dog popping in and out of here, kids popping in and out of here, doors slamming, and all the things. But that's summertime, and this is real life, folks. So we're not as polished as we would like to be, but I think it's kind of the point, right? Yeah.
Okay, so to close, Lexi, I wanted to ask you, because you are already a mom, what's one piece of advice that you just pray that your daughter knows? Like, what's one takeaway?
That's a tough one too. Okay, well, I think the biggest thing I look back on my own childhood is that I didn't have someone instill confidence in me. And I look at Michael's childhood and the way that all of his siblings were raised, and they were all so confident and encouraged. So one thing I want to do for my daughter is just really encourage her to try things, and I want her to do all of it. Like, everyone says, oh, is she gonna play basketball? Is she gonna do this? Is she gonna do I want her to do everything. Like, I want her to, like, my family has horses in there and rodeo. I want her to do this. I want her to do that. And just feel like she has confidence to try anything, and of course have a relationship with Jesus, which is so intimidating because it was modeled for me as a child. But it doesn't really matter because you have to find it on your own. And
so true.
So just I know we'll do our best. But just hoping that she has that too.
And just like you had a community, she probably has one of the best ones. Yeah. Don't you think?
Yeah.
She's so blessed.
She
already.
has a lolly and pop that are waiting for her.
I know. Well, thank you again, Lexi. You are such a blessing.
Yes.
And so many of our listeners will glean so much from this podcast.
Yeah, I was very intimidated to come on today because as I was listening, I was like, I just don't feel as well versed in my faith as these three, but I was like, hopefully the listener can relate to me, because I'm truly like am a listener of your guys' podcast. So
thank you.
I hope they can.
I guess that's it. Thank you, Lexi. Thank you for being here with us, and we will see you all next time.
Yeah, thank
you.
For having me.